crowd of more than 1,000 people. He came out with a pretty strong warning about the direction this country is headed in. And we should mention, I'm going to show you something, a part of that speech, but I want to tell you this video was shot on a cell phone. You should be able to hear it, but it's not the best video quality.
Now we're slipping into a fascist system where there's a combination of government and big business and authoritarian rule and suppression of the individual right of each and every American citizen. That is what we have to reverse and get the people to agree with us.
All right, so again, Ron Paul saying the U.S. is slipping into a fascist system dominated by government and businesses. Strong words there from the Texas congressman, and as usual, they are words largely ignored by the mainstream media. So we thought we'd take some time to talk about this more in depth. Let's go to journalist Michael Tracy in Montclair, New Jersey. Michael, as someone who has yet to win a primary in this campaign, these are seen by some people as strong words, derogatory words, even offensive by many. Why do you think Ron Paul felt the need to say this about the direction that the U.S. is heading in?
Well, this is something that Ron Paul's been saying for quite a while now. I think I remember an interview with him in 2007 where he said that, the state of the country amounts to soft fascism. So I don't think he's trying to say that the United States is on a path to, Hitler-esque.
In the Council, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist.
So, Michael, talk a little bit about this message from Eisenhower, somewhat similar today from Ron Paul, and what it all means in, for today, especially with considering how many people are really just sick of the wars that we've been fighting in for the last 10 years.
Right. Well, with the codification of many of Bush's worst excesses in terms of foreign policy by Obama, it's become clear that it's virtually impossible for the American citizenry to signal its disapproval of the military-industrial complex by way of traditional electoral avenues. I think that's what Ron Paul was speaking to with his comments from over the weekend. And because voting for Obama did not really attain any practicable change in that regard, Ron Paul's presentation of himself as a radically different alternative, I think, is gaining a lot of resonance. And for Ron Paul to warn about the dangers of the military-industrial complex on such a regular basis, I think is implanting that idea and the distrust of that institution within a new generation of politically aware individuals.
I think, nobody would argue that he is the most different out of all the candidates out there. Journalist Michael Tracy speaking to us about Ron Paul from Montclair, New Jersey. And again, one of Ron Paul's that anti-war stance. He wants to close the more than 900 U.S. military bases around the world. He wants to end the war in Afghanistan and spend way less on this country's military. Some people might even call him anti-military. But if you take a look at those who are actually serving in the military or who have served, they donate to Ron Paul's campaign more than any other candidate. His messages of getting out of the wars seems to actually resonate most with those who really understand the consequences of these wars. And today, hundreds of military veterans came out to show that support in a march called Ron Paul is the Choice of the Troops. It kicked off today at noon at the Washington Monument, and RT correspondent Liz Wall was there and has more.
His consistently strong anti-war message.
We don't need another war.
Understood, and you make that point quite a lot.
Is one that resonates with many U.S. troops today.
I don't believe that we should be over in these other countries messing around.
He wants to close the 900 overseas bases that we are funding, very expensive and growingly more expensive rate there that is bankrupting this country.
Well, hundreds of active duty troops, veterans, and their families are gathered here by the Washington Monument. They'll be marching to the White House to show their solidarity and support for Republican presidential candidate Ron Paul. Often ignored.
They deserve more than one mention on all the stations. Somebody went and added these all up.
Thank you,
So what's going on here? You're in this media business.
How did libertarian Ron Paul become the 13th floor in a hotel?
when his message isn't being cut off.
Well, I think it would be even more dangerous to start nitpicking wars with other countries. Someone like Iran, Israel is more than capable of.
All right, we just lost our tech connection, unfortunately.
The mainstream media would have you believe the military doesn't back Paul.
The top three contributors are the Air Force, the Army, and the Navy. And, you know, compare that to somebody like Mitt Romney, whose top donations are like Goldman Sachs.
In fact, Paul gets far more campaign donations from members of the military than any other presidential candidate.
Ron Paul seems to be the only person that's representing us instead of the defense contractors and bankers.
The danger is really us overreacting, and we need a strong national defense, and we need to only go to war with a declaration of war and just carelessly flouting it and starting these wars so often. President! Oh!
Sick of fighting seemingly never-ending wars overseas, these soldiers are ready for radical change. And the only hope for that, they say, is getting Paul into the White House. In Washington, Liz Wall, RT.